Can everybody hear me okay? Can you hear me okay? Back there? Okay. Alright, again, very welcome everybody this morning to this session. Can I just ask, the people who were here yesterday, the people who weren't here yesterday, can you just put up your hands so I can have an idea? Okay, so these are the people that were here yesterday. And the people who weren't here yesterday, can you put up your hands? You weren't here yesterday? Okay, so I have an idea of, you know, the kind of percentage of people who weren't here at the session yesterday, okay? So, for the people who weren't here yesterday, I'll just explain briefly who I am. I'm Gerald Campbell. I'm the Director of Library Services in Limerick Institute of Technology. I have a Master's in Education and Planning and Management, a Master's in E-Learning, and a postgrad in Learning Technologies. The area of interest that we have is this thing called information literacy. And we have been doing this for quite a number of years, particularly in the Western Balkans, in countries like Kosovo, Bosnia-Herzegovina, Albania and Montenegro. So what we covered yesterday for the people who weren't here, and also just to refresh for the people who were here yesterday, we gave a kind of a general introduction to what information literacy is. And you know, it became quite apparent yesterday that people weren't familiar with this term. And it is basically a relatively new concept. Now, when I say relatively new, it was first introduced by a guy called Zukowski, isn't it? Or, yeah, in 1973. And he wasn't an academic, nor was he a librarian, nor was he, you know, in the academic field. He was a business guy. And he kind of conjured up this term, which meant that people in employment need to be able to search for information correctly. And they need not only that, but they need to be able to do citation and referencing when they, you know, when they're writing papers in the business world. There was a lack of this type of overall concept. So this is what he introduced. And then it took maybe 15 years before it actually really took off. And librarians started to teach this information literacy. So why is it important to ye? Like, why would it be important for ye to know what information literacy is? Basically, it's the concept of, okay, so first of all, you need to be able to find your information. So that means you need to be able to identify the source that you need to use. You need to know the difference between quality information and information which wouldn't be suitable for your work. But then when you find that information, for your paper or your dissertation or your thesis to be credible, you have to be able to use referencing and citation. And to do that, you must do that correctly. There's no halfway of doing referencing citation. It's either correct or it's not correct, okay? And you will be judged if you go to write a paper and want to get it published. You'll be judged on the quality of your writing style, your information sources, and also on the quality of your citation and referencing. Okay, so yesterday we done an introduction of what the term information literacy was. And then we went through how to focus your research question. And Pádraig went through, you know, how you narrow down that particular subject, you know, how you actually focus that research question. Now, for the people who weren't here yesterday, Pádraig introduced, and he'll be doing some today, some modules which are online. So even though you missed the session yesterday, you'll still be able to do it in your own time. Okay, and the other thing Pádraig mentioned yesterday was information sources and resources. And that basically covered the difference between you know, peer-reviewed information and information that you'll find on the internet. And the difference between the printed book and the digital book, and you know, digital journals. So basically he went through you know, what different types of resources are available to you. He also covered some some search strategies of how you go about searching for information. And again, for the people who weren't here yesterday, he'll show you these online modules that you'll be able to do in your own time. And very importantly, and I'll mention it again today because you can't mention it enough, is evaluation of information. And this is when you find information, whether it be on the internet or whether it be in a journal, you have to have, an evaluation technique. And there's about 6 different criteria to that. Basically, from the authority of who is the person who wrote this information to the currency, how old is the information and how up to date is it. And I'll be covering it as well today because it's probably even more vital when you're searching for information on the internet. And the session I'll do later on is I'll do some web searching techniques, and what that'll do is it'll give you alternatives when you're looking for information other than Google, okay? Like, there's nothing wrong with Google, it's perfectly fine. There's nothing wrong with Wikipedia, it's perfectly fine. But as I mentioned yesterday, if your job depends on the quality and the accuracy of the information, well then you want to be very sure that the information that you're taking from the internet is correct, and that you have some method of cross-referencing it with information that's on the, say, in your library, okay? So I'll do that a little bit later on, but for now, Porrick is going to cover referencing, citation and plagiarism. Now, this isn't, referencing, citation and plagiarism is not an easy thing to do, okay? It's not fun. Okay, so you won't be having a great laugh here this morning. It's not what you call very exciting. But what it is very important. Okay? Now we'll be handing out these booklets later on as well. And Porrick will be mentioning them. It's called Write It Right. Both myself and Porrick wrote this particular book, and we give it out to our students. Now, the good thing about this is no matter what the type of resource you're using, whether it be a web page, a book, a journal, there's an easy guide of how you use citation and referencing in this. Now, I'm not sure if we're going to have enough copies for everybody, but we will send more copies to Natalia during this week, as soon as we get back. So if we don't have enough copies, don't worry about it. Okay, so I'm going to hand you over to Porrick. Has anybody got any questions so far? Everybody okay? All right, thank you.
Okay, just to introduce myself, my name is Padraig Kirby, and I work also at Limerick Institute of Technology. I'm a senior library assistant in the library, and just about my educational background. I have a Bachelor of Arts in the areas of theology and English, and higher diploma in library information studies, and also Master of Science in library information studies. And like Gerald, I've been covering this topic, this field for a long time, information literacy. And in the scheme of things, as Gerald explained, it's a very new topic. In that, this phrase, information literacy, it didn't exist in academia before 1973. Mr. Zurkowski, Paul Zurkowski, as Jared mentioned, invented this term, and it has somehow wound up that librarians have been given the responsibility, in most cases, to implement this information literacy, which is how to search, find, evaluate, and use information ethically. That's a pretty basic, but I think fairly clear explanation of what information literacy is. So yesterday, like Jared was saying, at the very beginning, we were trying to maybe come up with a topic or a title for your dissertation or an essay, or what we would call focusing your research question. You're trying to focus on what you're going to write about, basically. Trying to get to the point where you have a working title for your dissertation. And then you need to be aware of information sources and resources like we did yesterday. Would anybody like to give me an example of an information resource or source? There's one very close to me here on the right. There's a few of them. Books, okay? This is one example. The internet is another example. Journals, etc., etc. Even YouTube nowadays is starting to be used in academia. So all of these are examples of information resources and sources. And after that then, if you have the information sources and resources, for example, you know, you have it all in your head as to what they are. There's books and journals and DVDs and videos and theses, magazines, etc., etc. Online resources, Google databases. They're not much good to you unless you know how to search them. And yesterday we covered web search strategies and tactics, and later in the next hour, after this presentation, Jared is going to go into that in greater depth and just give you some tips about how to get the most out of the World Wide Web. You also need to know how to evaluate the information. Okay, you have focused your research question, you know what all the information sources and resources are, you know how to search for them. But again, this is not much good to you if you don't know how to evaluate. So would somebody like to give me an example? What criteria would you need to evaluate any piece of information or any journal, article, book in the context of what you're studying? Anybody like to suggest?
We spoke about it yesterday.
Yes.
Authority, for example.
Authority, yes. Yeah.
And others.
Authority. So, for example, is the person writing about, renewable energy, but are they, is their field librarianship? So hence, is this person authoritative to write about the field of renewable energy? Others then would be things like currency, I'm sure you've typed in searches into search engines and there's an option for you to decide, well, I think I'll just bring back information, anything between 1999 and 2007, right? Date is another one. And there are lots of other ones. Accuracy, if a piece of work, an article you find on the internet, if there are spelling errors, if there are grammar errors, if there are no reference list, obviously you would not use this. It would be unwise to use this because it's not accurate. So there's a few: currency, authority, accuracy, and there are a few others. And at the end of the session we will show you this online course that you can use and you can go back over this yourselves. So we've gotten to the point now where we have evaluated the information and we're getting down to write and get this thing done, get the thesis done, get the essay done. But you can't do that unless you know how to reference. And we call this booklet here, Jared mentioned it just to show it again, Write It Right. The reason we call it that is because we firmly believe that writing and academic writing is firmly it's impossible to write correctly unless you know how to referencing. In many ways, referencing is writing, because you can't make any claim or make any argument or support an argument unless you have something to back it up, and that's how we're referencing citation, avoiding plagiarism. So we're at this stage now where we're writing the essay. We're going to go into this referencing citation and plagiarism in more detail. Now this booklet, and what I'm talking about today, as you're probably aware, there are hundreds and hundreds of different referencing systems out there. They're all kind of largely based on, there's two main types really, but universities have their own referencing system. Perhaps your university have their own referencing system. The University of Limerick, for example, have their own referencing system. We have our own referencing system. So there are lots of different expressions or versions of this, but they're all largely based on two main types. There's something called the Harvard referencing system. It's sometimes also known as the author-date system, and it's very easily recognizable. Just think of author-date. I'm sure you've read a piece of work and somewhere as you're reading it might say Murphy 2007 or Kelly 2009 or whatever, you know. And this is the Harvard system, okay, author date. And then the other system, which I'm not going to go into in great detail today, to be honest, but it's called the numerical system. Can sometimes be known as Vancouver, and you will recognize this easily because you'll be reading, and instead of author date, you will see a number. It might say 1, it might say 2, 3, etc. And at the end, then you have them listed numerically in your reference list. And with the author date system, they're not listed numerically; they're listed alphabetically. So, excuse me, if you an article written by Adams, this will come before a book written by Brown. It will come before a book written by Kelly, etc., etc.
Just a matter of interest, what, can anybody just tell us which referencing system, or do you use any type of referencing system here?
I think it depends much on the scientific journal.
Right.
Different journals have different types of queries.
Yeah. Well, this is what Porrick is doing here is, you know, he's introducing you to one system. As you mentioned, there's lots of different systems, and depending on what field that you're actually writing in, you have to just be aware, you know, of which type of referencing system you're going to use. But for the people who wouldn't be very familiar with it, the Harvard system is, you know, very common, and at least if you have one style and it's consistent, it's better than having no style and no particular type of referencing system.
Yes, and for scientific papers like this there is a state standard.
Yes, right, okay. But again, not everybody be writing in the scientific field, you know. Okay.
Yeah, this is an important point, all right, because students often ask us this question: which referencing system should you use? And we always think it's not a question for us to answer, to be honest, because it depends. If you're a student writing a master's, the dissertation supervisor should know the answer to that. They should advise the student which referencing system to use. But we teach you about how to use the referencing system. But, you know, your lecturer or, you know, somebody in your department should know the answer as regards which one to use. So what is referencing? When you write an assignment, I've said the institute there, when you write an assignment anywhere, you are required to indicate that you have used the ideas and written materials belonging to other authors in your work, both in the text of your assignment and in a reference list at the end of your assignment. And this practice of acknowledging authors is known as referencing. So what are the different types of formats or sources you could reference? It could be any of these. And this isn't an exhaustive list. There may be some there that I haven't mentioned. It's just an example. But they're basically, you know, the main types would be obviously books, journal articles, electronic journal articles, World Wide Web pages. You may, depending if you're a student of art and design, you may have to reference paintings, images, drawings. If you're an engineering student, you may have to reference diagrams, even emails, social media. YouTube is now being used increasingly by academics to put things like lectures, conference papers up onto the web. Video, DVD, newspapers, conference papers, radio, TV broadcasts, podcasts even, interviews, thesis and other academic work. So it's not an exhaustive list. And we've covered this already. Which referencing system should you use? And basically the answer to that is either author date or numerical system, sometimes known as Vancouver, but check with your lecturer. So there are two main parts to the author date system of referencing. The author and the date are referred to in the text or main body of your writing. This is called citing, okay? So like I said, it could be O'Brien 2007, Murphy 2009, etc., etc. And then all of the resources referred to in the body of the writing are included in the reference list at the end of the assignment. So this is an example of it in action. See, you have this passage of text and you have your reference list. And this is an example from, if you're using something called EndNote. Has anybody heard of EndNote? EndNote is a piece of software that it basically creates reference lists for you and creates citation. So as you cite while you write, okay? So as you're citing, your reference list is building and building all along, right to the end. And rather than in the old days where people had to turn around and at the very end, after writing many pages for many hours, they have to turn around and do this horrible reference list. Nowadays, the way things are moving is that you cite while you write, okay? This is known as EndNote. If you're interested in a free version, there is a product, and it's freely available as far as I'm aware. EndNote is subscription based, unfortunately, but it's called Mendeley. So if you're interested in this whole area of referencing software, have a look at Mendeley.
Do you use electronic tools for citation or referencing? Like, do you use EndNote or this Mendeley? So do you write it out by hand? Welcome to the pain. Okay. Well, this, as Porrick mentioned, if you look for the free version, this Mendeley, it'll actually do this for you. So if you take anything electronically, particularly, isn't it, Porrick?
Yes.
It'll actually take the source and put it into a reference list for you. So it makes life a lot easier. Plus, it'll be more accurate as well.
So the way these things work is you cite while you write, and when you're finished writing, you're finished citing also. That's the way. And then, so what are the essential elements? And what's nice about this book here, just to point it out again, is that there is a guide, a kind of a quick find referencing guide at the back. It's about 20 pages at the back of that book, which basically gives you all the essential elements for pretty much any type of resource that you may need to use. So this is just an excerpt from that. For example, if it's a book, you need author, year, title, place of publication, publisher. You may need to put in the edition also, depending if it's a second edition. If it's a first edition, you never put in the edition. And there's some of the other types. Book chapter is slightly different. Journal article is slightly different again. So, why should anybody have to bother referencing at all? Why do we do this? So here are some reasons. Firstly, you receive credit for all the background research and hard work you've done, okay? You did a good job, which contributes to a good mark. Your supervisor, if you're doing a doctorate or whatever, can give you feedback on what you've done. It helps you understand how to improve and develop your ability to write and express yourself clearly. It places your own work in context by showing how it relates to prior research and current academic debates in your discipline. And just more on this, it allows your reader to explore the subject further by looking up your sources and reviewing them in greater depth. So, if a student has done their doctorate and it's sitting in the cabinet in the library, they've long gone from the university, they're out in the workplace now, and they've left university behind, but somebody else walks in someday, walks up to the cabinet, picks up their doctoral thesis, reads it, reads the bibliography and the reference list. They like some of the ideas in the reference list. They want to access some of those sources because they're writing a dissertation on a related topic, not exactly the same, but they want to read, etc., etc. And this is why referencing, it allows the reader to explore the subject further. You know, you're contributing to research and you're contributing you're contributing to research in a certain subject, and hence your reader can explore that, okay? And your legacy is there. Plagiarism, referencing also helps you to avoid plagiarism, okay? And if you know how to reference and how to cite, you won't plagiarize, it won't happen, okay? And plagiarism, it can be unintentional. Why do you think it could be unintentional? It could be unintentional simply because the person may not know how to cite and how to reference correctly. It could be the result of carelessness, or it could be just blatant. Somebody, perhaps they've left everything until the last minute, they go onto an online database, they copy 6-7 pages, they paste it into Word, they put their name on it. That's a very blatant example of it. And apparently academics are much attuned to detecting plagiarism because they are in command of the relevant subject literature and are sensitive to changes in writing style. So what does this mean? Basically what this means is that, you know, any academic, whether it's, you know, their area is renewable energy or librarianship or science or English literature, they should know all of the most important authors who've written on their topic. And because they know this, they are, you know, attuned to detecting plagiarism. They know the authors, they've read the stuff before, excuse me, and they should have the skills to actually detect it because, you know, intellectual output and writing output is so vast. Nowadays, academics, they use electronic tools to detect plagiarism. You might have heard of something called Turnitin, and this is just a piece of software which detects plagiarism. Okay.
Are there any sanctions here for, you know, if somebody has been caught plagiarizing? Like when I say sanction, would it be likely that the person would be, you know, thrown out of college? Would that happen? No? All right, okay. Well, it would happen if it would happen quite a lot in the UK, in Ireland, and lots of places in Europe. That if you're found to be plagiarising, either you'll get 0 score for that particular piece of work, or if you had done, say, a doctorate or a master's, and it was found that your thesis was plagiarised, your master's would be null and void, and you'd have to start again. Or you might not even be allowed to participate in the college again. So, you know, it's something that you must be aware of, particularly when you leave. If you were to leave here and go to get a job in, or go to do further studies in the US or in Europe or in Ireland or England or wherever, plagiarism is deemed to be a very serious offence. Okay.
And just finally then, a very important reason, by referencing and citing, you're demonstrating your intellectual integrity by acknowledging the influence of other people's work on your own and distinguishing clearly between their work and your own ideas. So if I was to define what plagiarism is, or explain the use of plagiarism, I think this is it. When you're, or sorry, the use of referencing. When you're referencing, what you're doing is, firstly, you're acknowledging the influence of other people's work on your own, and secondly, what you're doing is you're distinguishing clearly between their work and your own ideas. Okay? So, I think Gerald mentioned this lately, yesterday. There have been some high-profile cases of people who have plagiarized, and it has come back to haunt them in years to come, you know, or it has created problems for them in later life. So just some more definitions. Plagiarism is the deliberate or reckless representation of another's words through, thoughts or ideas as one's own without attribution in connection with the submission of academic work, whether graded or otherwise. Another example, I prefer this particular definition: passing off someone else's work, whether intentionally or unintentionally. Okay, so I like this definition because it can be unintentional, simply because, for example, you know, if the student doesn't come to one of these sessions, or if they have never read anything about how to cite and how to reference before, they could then unintentionally plagiarize. And intentional then is just copying and pasting, for example, or just taking excerpts from books without the appropriate acknowledgement.
Like when we do these sessions, say for example, in some countries that we do this session on referencing and citation, and when we ask the class, it's quite common for up to maybe 70% or maybe 80% of a piece of work is just copied and pasted. And you know, maybe the student or the the person writing the paper might put a bit of an introduction at the beginning and a bit of a conclusion at the end, and then submit that as their own work without doing an exhaustive citation and referencing guide at the back. That is completely plagiarized, and it wouldn't be acceptable. Now, I know it's kind of common. I see people are smiling at me here. There's some sneaky smiles that maybe this is kind of common practice, but just know that wouldn't be acceptable. Okay.
So just some examples of plagiarism: copying chunks of text without using quotation marks and without appropriate acknowledgement. For example, cutting and pasting text from website encyclopedias or online research papers, excuse me, or copying papers written by students who took the same course in previous years. Copying text and making very minor changes and without appropriate acknowledgement. This is called unacceptable paraphrasing. Towards the end, we're going to just do a small exercise about how to, it'll help you understand what paraphrasing is about. We'll talk about paraphrasing later. Copying a picture or photo from the internet without appropriate acknowledgement. Copying all or part of the engineering drawings of another. Copying the melody of a song in a songwriting assignment. Okay, this is if you're studying music maybe. Using another person's numerical spreadsheet. Okay, so if your piece of work involves maybe statistics, you may use spreadsheets. Duplicating your own work by submitting almost exactly the same piece of work for two different assignments. Excuse me. And finally then, if you're maybe studying software engineering or some information technology related course, you may have to use code, and if you use code developed by another person without acknowledging him or her as the person who developed it, that is also plagiarism. You may need written permission from the owner of copyrighted work if you include lengthy quotations or if you include reprinted or adapted tables of figures or drawings. The term reprinting indicates that the material is reproduced exactly as it appeared originally, without modifications in the way which it was intended. The term adaptation refers to modification of material so that it is suitable for a new purpose. This is known as paraphrasing. So just to reiterate again, there's two main elements. Excuse me. There's two main elements to referencing. There's citing, which is acknowledging sources within the text. This is sometimes known as in-text referencing. And there's the reference list itself, which is a detailed list of references which have been cited within the text. So we saw earlier what the reference list looks like. It's alphabetical, A to Z, you know, authors beginning with A before authors beginning with B, etc., etc. Now, you may, depending on what you're doing and on the wishes of your supervisor, there may be a third element where you may have to produce what's called a bibliography. Okay? Now, a reference list and a bibliography, they're not the same thing. Okay? Students often think they are. They're not. A reference list is a list of everything that you cited. And a bibliography is a list of additional materials that you didn't cite. Okay? But, for example, it might be books that were on a reading list, or an article you're on a reading list that you did read, but you didn't cite for some reason. Maybe you didn't need to cite it, but you read it, and hence it may have helped to shape your own thought on the matter. If you've used an idea from a book, a journal article, you must acknowledge this in your text. This is referred to as citing. Okay, so this is an example here. Greg, 1994, describes the function of the comma as the non-essential expressions that interrupt the flow of thought from subject to verb to object or complement. Now, that is the citation there, okay? That's called a citation. And why is there a page number there, do you think? This page number is there because this tells the reader that this passage here, these two lines were lifted directly from the book and put into your assignment, okay? It's direct quotation. Here's some more examples. You see here you have, in this case, the citation is at the end of the sentence. Okay. Now, when should you use quotations? They should only be used sparingly, selected carefully, used in context and integrated into your text. They should be reproduced exactly, including the words, spelling, punctuation, capitalization and paraphrasing of the original writers. You would use a quotation if, firstly, misinterpretation would result from a change to the words, if a major argument needs to be recorded as evidence, if it's important to comment on, refute or analyse ideas expressed, or often people just use a quotation because it's just a nice phrase, okay? It's a nice forceful phrase, it makes the point well. And short quotations then should be incorporated into your sentence without disrupting the flow of your paragraph. Have single quotation marks, the full stop after the citation, keep the same font size. And longer quotations then, generally with longer quotations you introduce them on a new line, you give them its own space, you give longer quotations their own space. So here is an example of a citation. This is a long quotation. Okay. And quotation marks are not used for longer quotations. Now, this is something that you may use from time to time. It's known as an ellipsis. It's used to, you see this here? It's used to omit words from quotations. And you may need to do this if you're having difficulty in making the quotation fit into the context or where you want it to fit in your piece of writing. So this tells the reader here, these dots, that you have omitted some text here on purpose because it wasn't really necessary in the context of what you're writing, and that's known as an ellipsis. So when you cite someone else's work, you must always state the author, the editor, and the date of publication. Okay. So like I said, Murphy 2007, etc. If the work has two authors, you must cite both names when citing. Only use the author and date. You don't include anything else, title, place of publication, because these full details of the item are written in your reference list at the end of your essay. So here's some more examples. The author cited in the body of the text. You see here O'Brien and Ryan, the work of O'Brien et al. Now this et al. Is used if there are 3 or more authors. Okay? If you have 2 authors, you can say it like this, but supposing that piece of work is written by O'Brien and Ryan Murphy, you use et al. Okay? For a work which has the same author and was written in the same year as an earlier citation, you must use a lowercase letter after the date to differentiate between the two. Okay, that's if an author has written 2 articles in the same year. Now, this is known as secondary referencing. If you're reading a source by one author, for example, O'Brien, and they cite or quote work by another author, you may in turn cite or quote the original piece of work as a secondary reference. So there's just an example of that there. So just citing page numbers in text, use the surname only. Both authors' surnames should be linked by this ampersand for 2 authors. And the ampersand should only be used in citing, not in the reference list. You use the word "and" to connect authors in the actual reference list, but there's no need for "and." You can just use this ampersand here for the 2 authors. And use single quotation marks. Double quotation marks are used for quoting direct speech. And just more about citing year of publication. When you use quotations within your text, sometimes you may want to insert 1 or 2 words in the quotation so that your complete sentence is grammatically correct. To indicate you have inserted words into a quotation, these have to be enclosed in square brackets. So you see here, obviously, whoever was writing this, they were having difficulty in making this piece from the book fit into the context of where they were writing, and they inserted this "and" here, okay? And that tells the reader that you have put in a word yourself into the middle of this quotation taken from another book or journal or whatever, to help it make sense or help it fit better into the where you're writing, you know, into the context. So if you're using tables and figures and images and graphs, charts, diagrams, pictures should be treated as direct quotes in that the author should be acknowledged and page numbers shown both in your text where the diagram is discussed or introduced and in the caption you write for it. So here's just an example here. This is the way you would treat it. Here's the image, and you have here then the reference for it underneath. And just remember about the difference between adapted and if the table, figure, graph has been adapted, you have to put adapted with permission instead of saying reprinted with permission. If you say reprinted, that means that you've taken the image and just put it into your piece of work without making any changes. If it's adapted, so you may, for example, have called this, instead of General Assembly, you may have called it Project Management Committee or something like that. Okay? So the reference list is a list of all the sources that have been cited in your work, showing books, journals, etc., listed in one list, not in separate lists. And this is a common mistake that students make. Students often think that if you have books and journals and web resources, that you put books in one list, you put web resources in another list, you put journals in another list. And it's not done like this. Everything is in one list, A to Z. Now, in some ways, perhaps it might be easier to work with if they were in separate lists, but it's just not the way it's done. It's done in one alphabetical list, and this is the way this has been done throughout time. I suppose it's better in that way as well, because if they're in one list and if the person is reading a piece of work, as they're reading, they can go back to the back pages of the piece of work and check who the author is, check who what the title is, etc. And if it's all in one list, it's probably smoother in that way. But the reference list is a list of all the sources that have been cited in your work. It shows books, journals listed in one list, not in separate lists, according to resource type. So as I said, you don't put books in one list and journals in another. Everything is together in one list, in alphabetical order, okay? And it's by author, okay? The first entry is the author always, okay? Books, paper journal articles, e-journal articles are laid out in a defined template. You will see all of those templates in that booklet that we're going to hand you out. So there is, an exact, for example, a book is author, year, title, place of publication, publisher, and you may need to include edition if it's a second, third, or fourth, fifth edition, etc. A reference list contains all the items you have cited or directly quoted from. Now, the differences between a reference list and a bibliography, and the way bibliographies are treated can differ, even within the Harvard system. It can differ from university to university. A bibliography is presented in the same format as a reference list, but it includes all material consulted in the preparation of your assignment. In other words, a bibliography presents the same items as a reference list, but it also includes all other sources which you have read or consulted but did not cite. Now, there can be some variances in that with some, in some cases, the way the Harvard system is treated with regard to bibliographies, it's just a list of additional material. It doesn't include all the other stuff you have in the reference list. And in some cases, it can be treated where it does include all the stuff that was in the references plus all the additional material. It depends from university, it depends in some cases from supervisor to supervisor. So ask them about that, what way they want it done. Probably the best way to do it is to have the bibliography just listing additional material and not repeating what was in the reference list, but it's sometimes done like this, okay? A bibliography allows you to show to the reader the unused research you carried out. So a good example of that is if you read, your lecturer may have given you a big long reading list, and supposing you read 9, 10, 11 books from this reading list, but for whatever reason you didn't cite from them, but you did read them, you know, and they may have influenced you, they may have helped you write the piece of work. So you should put anything like that in your bibliography, and obviously then a reference list is only stuff that you have cited, okay? What's in the reference list is only the stuff where you have said O'Brien 2004 or whatever, and only that goes into your reference list. So how do you compile a reference list? Some tips on this. It should be an alphabetical list. It should not be listed 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, unless you were using the other type of referencing system that I spoke about at the beginning, what's known as the Vancouver, sometimes known as numerical, then it's in numbers. But if it's Harvard author date, it must be alphabetical by author. A bibliography is a list of works you use in the preparation of the work which you did not necessarily cite or refer to. Now, as I said, the list must not be numbered, okay? It must not be numbered. One line should be left between each reference. Where there is no author, use the title. This may occur sometimes. Or you may have to use something called a corporate author, okay? So, supposing the author is the Ministry of Education or the Health Service Executive or whatever, that's known as a corporate author. And sometimes you may not be able to find an actual person author, an actual person, because it's written by an organization, you know, like it could be written, as I said, by the Ministry of Education or the, you know, the university in Saransk or, you know, whatever. References in your reference list must be a full description of in-text references. So what's in text is just short. Murphy 2004. What's in the reference list is the whole author, year, title, place of publication, and you must follow the specific template, and that there are different templates. For example, the template for a web page will obviously be completely different from the template from that of a book. You know, okay, you'll have similar elements. You'll probably still have an author. You have a place. You have a year of publication, but the year of publication for the book, you'll probably find it on the back of the title page. Whereas with a web article, for example, you'll probably see it. It might say copyright 2009 or last updated 2009, or it may just say written in 2009, you know, but it'll be on the web page somewhere. Okay. So if there is more than one publication by the same author, arrange the works in chronological order from the most recent to the oldest. Another common question students have. Sometimes authors can be quite, you know, prolific. They may turn out 3, 4 papers in a year, 5 papers, right? And how do you treat them then? If you have an author who, you know, has written an article in 2007, another one in 2012, another one in 2013, they're arranged from the most recent to the oldest. Okay, the most recent is listed first. So this is an example of a reference list. And you see there, everything is in one list, as I said. The first one by Andrews, this is a book. The second one, this is an online book. Third one, a book. Fourth one is a dissertation, okay, thesis. Fifth one is another book, online book, online book, I think. Online article, okay, from an electronic database. You may have heard of a database called Science Direct. And the final one then is an online article, again, from an electronic database. So if I had DVDs, if I use DVDs or videos or YouTube, you would find it in here too, okay, because it's all in one list. How do you treat the date of publication? The date of publication of the work, it usually appears on the back of the title page, okay? So you find it at the back of the title page. If no date is given for publication, use an approximate date. Now, whether you would use a publication that doesn't have a date is questionable anyway. I mean, possibly you might. I mean, if you're a student of English literature or something, and I don't know, medieval, older texts, perhaps you might have to use a piece of work that has no date. But this is how you treat it. If one or other date is correct, if you're not sure if it was published in 93 or 94, then you express it like this. If the probable date, you think it's 94 but you're not sure, the approximate date, when the decade is known but not the year, when there is no knowledge of the date at all, you use, this is Latin, I think, sine anno, or ND. And again, it would be questionable. You'd have to say to yourself, right, I mean, can I use this, you know, if I'm studying computer science or something, or, you know, or renewable energy or whatever, you know, it's questionable if you could even use a resource that has no date. But, you know, as I said, if you're a student of English or history, perhaps, you may actually have to use this because it might simply, you know, nobody might know when this was written. You know, it's just the information might not be available. The place of publication is given in the language in which you were writing. Okay? So if there's more than one place of publication, give only the first place. This is another question students can have. You may look at a book and at the back of the title page it might say London, Paris, New York, Tokyo, etc., etc. And they say, well, which one is the place of publication? You give the first place listed, okay? And the place of publication is the town or city. So if it was published in Saransk, the place of publication is Saransk. If it was published in Limerick, the place of publication is Limerick. If published in Dublin, etc., etc. And there are some rules with how you treat American publications. You have to include the state, okay? So, for example, if it's published in Los Angeles, you have to say Los Angeles followed by CALIF. Okay? If it was published in Miami, you have to say Miami FLA. Okay? And always then, with the treatment of the publisher, a colon separates the place of publication and the publisher. So there's an example: Oxford, colon, Oxford University Press. If no publisher is given, the abbreviation SN, sine nomino, may be used. Initials of publishers are usually omitted. So if it's E.J. Wiley, or if it's, you know, the publisher is the name of a person, you know, publishers, their names are sometimes called after the name of a person. You don't include the full name, you just say Wiley, okay? As in that example. Initials are used if it is necessary to distinguish between different publishers. Titles then. Titles of published works are always italicized. This means that the titles of unpublished works are never italicized. For journals, the title of the journal is always italicized. Okay? The title of a journal article is never italicized, and the title of a journal must not be abbreviated. So in the reference list, you would never say, for the British Medical Journal, you would never abbreviate it to BMJ. You give it its full title. Okay? The treatment of acronyms and initials. Examples, for example, EPA, Environmental Protection Agency, Health Service, Executive, HSE. And these must appear both in text and in the reference list. If a work contains numerous references to a particular resource with a long title, for example, Irish Society for Prevention of Cruelty to Children, the initials may be used: ISPCC, EPA, HSE, etc. And then the treatment of countries. This is has common usage: USA, UK. The first citation in text must include the full title and the acronym or initials, and thereafter the acronym and initials will suffice. And this makes sense because otherwise you will be increasing your word count. There will be needless use of very, very long titles for organizations. And the first citation in text must include both the full title and the acronym or initials, and thereafter, yes, as I've said. So here's an example. The Irish Society for Prevention of Cruelty to Children provides activities which are child-centred, placing the child as the key focus of practice. This is based on the belief that all children have the right to access support services. So you see there, it gets its full title initially, and after that then you just use the acronym. Now another stumbling block sometimes for students is how to treat capitalization. What should you give capital letters and what should you not give capital letters? So, like everything with this, the area of referencing and citation, just be consistent. Choose a certain way to do it and stick with it. So, if you're doing minimal capitalization, you see here only the first word is actually capitalized, and nothing else is, unless there's a reason for it to be capitalized. It might be the name of a country or the name of a person, but otherwise this is called minimal capitalization, and this is what we would advise. Now you can do it this way if you want, but it's very, very fussy and time consuming. If you basically what's happened here is that everything is actually capitalized, bar the what we call prepositions, bar the des and ofs and ands and ors, and that is very fussy, and you can if you wish to do it, it's awkward, and this is probably the best way. Okay, so almost finished now. I spoke about that there are two different systems. There are two types of referencing systems out there, and all referencing systems are either versions of one or the other. The Harvard system, as I said, okay, we know what that's about now. The numeric system, in the text, there is a number and not the author's name. Starting with 1 for the first citation given, 2 for the second. The reference is given the same number used for the citation, and then full details of the source stating the author's name. Starting with the author's surname and initial. The date of publication given towards the end. Okay, so we saw with the Harvard system, what we have is, Murphy, J, 2007. So the date is more at the beginning with the Harvard system. With the numeric system, if you wish to use it, remember that the templates are slightly different in that the order of where they come, the date comes at the end rather than at the beginning. Okay, that's just more about the Vancouver style. How do I go back? Okay, we'll keep going. So the Vancouver style, then, you use numbers, okay, rather than authors. When using the Vancouver style, the reference list should be in numerical order, and each number matches and refers to the one in the text. The list should be at the end of your work. Books, papers, electronic articles are written in a particular format that must be followed. So you see here, this is quite different. It's pretty much the same, but you see where the date is here. It's at the end rather than at the beginning, and you're using numbers rather than... So if you're interested to learn more about the numerical system, the Imperial College in London in the United Kingdom have a good guide there it's just simply called Vancouver Referencing Style, and you can have a look at that if you want to go into it in greater depth. Now there's another style, then it's a relative of the numerical system. It's called documentary note style. Now you may have come across this in your reading, and this is sort of, it's considered antiquated. It's not used so much anymore, okay? The documentary note style consists of citations in the body of a paper using a superscript raised number, generally at the end of a sentence, a list of footnotes at the bottom of each page. Has anybody ever come across this when studying? Yeah. This is not used so much anymore, but you may come across it. They're sometimes known as endnotes if they appear at the end of a chapter, section, or division, okay? So this is what it looks like. You have somebody typing up here, and underneath you have these footnotes, okay? It's known as the documentary note system, and as I say, it's not in great usage anymore, okay? And there's lots of, the reason why I suspect it's not in great usage is that there's a lot of Latin abbreviations that you need to understand to be able to use this, and it's quite fussy in my opinion, and I would prefer either, you know, I mean Harvard is much easier to use. You have to understand what all of these abbreviations mean. So there's an example of it in action. That's just a passage there about famous fashion designer, and you see here the references are building at the foot of each page, not at the very end of the assignment. Now, I have a little exercise for you to do in a minute. Now, how do I go back? This one?
The second one.
This one? Okay. Paraphrasing is using the work of others, keeping the same meaning, but writing in your own choice of words. Okay, paraphrasing is generally more highly valued by academics than direct quoting, because paraphrasing the information, you are demonstrating that thought processing has taken place. In other words, you have thought about the information and have understood what you have read. Paraphrasing allows you to demonstrate that you understand what you have read and you can apply the knowledge, and it shows that you can better maintain your personal style, smooth flow of your essay. So this is just an example here. And basically what we have here, this is a passage, right, written about the famous philosopher Marx, okay? And you see here, this is the original extract from the book, okay? And two students had a go at paraphrasing this here, okay? And this book is written by Peter Worsley. So what they did, they read Peter Worsley, they decided they wanted to use some of this, they paraphrased, okay? But one of these is incorrect, okay? Now I don't know if you can see this back here, but which one do you think is wrong? Which is unacceptable? So I'll give you a few minutes and you can have a look at it. First one is unacceptable. Yes, that was very quick. I think that's the quickest anybody ever got this. So you see here the reason why it's unacceptable is that you'll see that there are parts of text which have been taken from here and not cited. And also, you know, there's no way of knowing where these pieces of text have been taken from. There's no way of knowing, okay, he has given a reference, right? But the reader has no way to know where from Peter Worsley's book that this idea was taken from. So even if you're just paraphrasing, even if you're not taking directly from the book, you're still using someone else's idea. And if you're using someone else's idea, you have to cite, okay? And when would you use a page number then? Why is there no page number in this citation, do you think?
There are no quotation marks.
Yeah, but what? Yes, and there are no. Why are there no quotation marks? Because you have paraphrased this. They're not the author's words, right? They're your words, okay? And they're. But it's still this guy's idea, okay? It's not your idea. It's only. It's his idea, but they are your words, so you don't need a page number. Okay. So we're all done. Has anybody any questions?
Which style do you prefer?
Well, we use the Harvard author date system. Yeah, this is what we prefer. It's easier. Okay.
Okay, I'm going to hand out, as I mentioned, I'm going to hand out these documents or these books to you now. I didn't want to hand them out when Pádraig was given the actual, you know, the instruction, because people would actually be reading it as he was going through it, and you'd be distracted from the actual lecture itself. But as you can see, there's quite a lot of rules, and this is just with one system. This is just using the Harvard system. And you can see, you know, the detail, the minute detail that you actually have to go into is quite difficult. you know, if I ask for a show of hands, how many people, like, from yesterday's session, there was, when we asked at the beginning, there was mostly students who were master's students or professors in the room. And can I ask, how many people have actually got instruction on referencing and citation? Have you ever done a session like that before? So if you have, can you put up your hand? If you haven't, can you put up your hand? Okay, let's see this, and like we give this instruction to, this is part of our information literacy course, and we give this instruction to students when they come into the college at an undergraduate level, the first, probably, you know, probably within the first week of them coming into the college to get instruction on this, and then they'll continue, continuously get instruction on how to do this right. So it's very difficult for people, if you've never actually been taught all of this stuff, it's very difficult then to sit down and try and write an academic paper and get it accepted for a conference or get it accepted for a publication. So if you haven't actually got this instruction, it's much more difficult. Okay, so I'm going to hand these out and then we're going to take a break for, I think, about 10 minutes. So can I actually just, and as I mentioned, we'll send more of these next week as well.